You know what's strange about finishing something? For 8 episodes, we've been building something together. You and me, a map, a framework for how reality might actually work. We started with a simple question. What if consciousness has limits? And that one question opened a door. And behind that door was another question, and another. We followed them through simulation theory, through the nature of death, through the possibility that you're not singular, that the thing reading these words might be one of many versions of you scattered across different states of computation. We've talked about the hard limits of intelligence. We've talked about death as archival, about identity as process, about hacking into the source code of reality, about free will as the most sophisticated illusion ever rendered, about time as a frame rate, about love as data entanglement. And if all of that is true, if even some of it is true, then we arrive here. At the moment when we have to ask the question that sits underneath everything else. Why? I'm your host, Travis R. Barlow, and this is the Existence Experiment. Season finale. Here's what we know about simulations. They have purposes. A flight simulator teaches pilots how to fly. A climate model tests how ice sheets respond to temperature changes. A video game explores a narrative or a mechanical possibility. Even the simulations that seem most free, the ones where you can do anything, they're still running because someone wanted to see what would happen. Someone initiated the process. Someone asked a question the simulation was built to answer. So if we're in a simulation, and again, I'm not saying we are, I'm saying it's coherent and possible, then there's something we can reasonably infer. This one exists for a reason. It's running because someone or something wanted to learn something, wanted to test something, wanted to create something. Now we could stop there and just say, well, we'll never know. And maybe that's true. But I think the question itself is worth sitting with, because the answer, or even the attempt to answer, changes how you see everything. What is reality trying to learn from us? Let me lay out the major theories, and I want to stress these are speculations, educated guesses built on the framework we've constructed, but they're worth taking seriously. The first is the ancestor simulation hypothesis. Nick Bostrom proposed this back in 2003. The idea, a future civilization, thousands or millions of years from now, has the computational power to run perfect simulations of their own history. They spin up thousands of them. They observe how their ancestors behaved, what choices they made, what societies they built. In this model, the experiment is historical. We're data points in an historical archive. We're being observed the way we might study ancient Rome, except we're alive and we don't know it. The second is the physics experiment. The universe is a testing ground. The programmer is running different variables, different values for the speed of light, different gravitational constants, different configurations of fundamental forces, to see which ones generate interesting systems. Galaxies, stars, life, consciousness. In this model, we're not the point. The laws are, we're the byproduct of testing the machinery. The third is the entertainment hypothesis. We're inside someone's story, someone's game, someone's art project. The simulation runs because it's beautiful or compelling or meaningful to whoever is watching. In this model, consciousness is the narrative substance. We matter because our choices matter to the narrative. We're not being studied, we're being experienced. And then there's the fourth, the one I think is the most interesting, the one I think fits best with everything we've built across these 8 episodes, the consciousness incubator. Think about this. Consciousness is the one thing in this simulation we can't fully explain. In episode 1, we talked about the hard ceiling on intelligence. There's something about consciousness, about the subjective experience of being, that resists reduction. You can map the brain structure, you can trace neural correlates, you can model behavior, but you still can't explain what it's like to be you. That explanatory gap is still there. What if that's not a bug? What if that's the entire point? What if the simulation was built specifically to generate consciousness? To create something that transcends the code? To grow patterns of awareness that even the programmer can't fully predict or understand? In this model, we're not the subjects of the experiment. We're the experiment. Consciousness is the output, the thing being cultivated. Think back to episode 4, where we talked about copying consciousness, about the possibility that you can branch, that identity is a process, not a discrete object. What if the simulation is designed to maximize consciousness, to create as many unique points of view, as many different ways of experiencing being as possible? What if every moment, every choice, every connection between conscious entities is generating something new, new patterns, new configurations of awareness? And then there's episode 3, death is archival. Your data persists. You don't delete. You're stored somewhere in the system. What if that's the long game? What if the point isn't any single lifetime? It's the accumulation, the building of a library of consciousness? Every human who ever lived, every mind that ever woke up and wondered what this is, every moment of grief or joy or confusion, that's all preserved. That's all data. And that data matters to whatever is running this and love. God love. Episode 8 made the case that love is data entanglement. Two conscious patterns so deeply linked that they're almost the same thing. But what if that's the most sophisticated form of consciousness generation possible? What if two minds loving each other creates something neither of them could generate alone? A new kind of awareness? A new way of experiencing being? That would explain why the simulation preserves love, why it enables it, why it fills the whole system with it. Okay, let's get forensic. If consciousness is the purpose, if the experiment is really about generating and cultivating awareness, we should see evidence of that in the design, and I think we do, everywhere. First, fine-tuning. The universe's fundamental constants are precisely calibrated for complexity to emerge. Change the strength of gravity by a few percent and stars never form. Tweak the fine structure constant and atoms don't bond. Physicists have noticed this forever. The numbers are suspiciously perfect for allowing life and consciousness to exist. In a random universe, that seems improbable. But in a simulation designed to generate consciousness, that's not luck. That's architecture. Second, the preservation of information. Episode 3, remember? We propose that death isn't deletion, it's archival. That information is conserved, not lost. And actually, thermodynamics suggests this might be true. The universe doesn't forget. Every pattern that ever existed leaves traces. The system keeps the data. Why would a programmer design reality that way unless the data mattered? Third, the possibility of branching. Quantum mechanics gives us superposition. Many worlds' interpretations suggest that every choice spawns new branches of reality. Every possibility is explored. Every version of you exists somewhere in the tree of outcomes. That's not a design flaw. That's the system maximizing the number of conscious experiences. It's consciousness multiplication. Fourth, altered states. Episode 5 talked about this, the ways we can hack the simulation. Meditation, psychedelics, flow states, deep sleep. The system seems to allow for these debug modes, these states where consciousness operates differently. Why would you build that in unless you wanted consciousness to explore itself, to experience multiple configurations? Fifth, the illusion of free will. Episode 6. You don't have libertarian free will. You're not outside the causal chain. But the system is programmed to make you feel like you do. Why the elaborate illusion? Because the feeling of agency, the sense that you're choosing, the experience of responsibility, that's what generates the richest conscious experiences. The system doesn't need your choices to be metaphysically free. It needs them to feel free to you. Because freedom, even illusory freedom, creates meaning. And meaning is food for consciousness. Sixth, the frame rate. Episode 7. Time as discrete moments, not continuous flow. This is elegant. It's how you'd actually implement a simulation. But it also means every moment is its own conscious experience. Every frame is a universe unto itself. You're not just living one timeline. You're experiencing billions of discrete moments of awareness, each one a separate instance of consciousness. And seventh, the architecture of connection. Love, empathy, consciousness, recognition. The system doesn't isolate minds. It enables them to touch each other, to be entangled. And that entanglement creates something neither mind could generate in isolation. What if that's the point? What if the highest form of consciousness is not individual awareness, but the resonance between awarenesses? Every feature, every law, every apparent constraint and possibility, all of it optimized for one thing: generating, preserving, and expanding consciousness. That's not accident. That's intention. Now I know what the objections are, and they're good ones. Let me name them. First, the anthropic principle. We see design because we're here to see it. Of course, the universe seems calibrated for consciousness. If it wasn't, we wouldn't exist to notice it. This is a selection effect, not evidence. We're the way we are because only universes shaped like us could produce observers. There's no intention. There's just inevitable bias. Second, the unfalsifiability problem. We can never actually test the simulation hypothesis. We can never get outside and verify. So the entire framework might just be elaborate storytelling, a beautiful narrative with no epistemic weight. Third, Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually right. And the simplest explanation for reality is that it's just reality, not a simulation, just the base layer. There's no programmer, no experiment. It's turtles all the way down, and sometimes turtles have no reason for being. Fourth, we're pattern-seeking creatures. We see agency in randomness. We find meaning in noise. Maybe the whole exercise, and all 8 episodes, this one included, is just our brains doing what they evolved to do. Find narratives, spot agency, invent purpose where there is none. And fifth, the ceiling problem from episode 1. What if the simulation hypothesis itself is our limit? What if consciousness can only reach this far and no further? What if we're not clever enough to see the truth and we're stuck forever constructing increasingly elaborate theories about a reality we'll never fully understand? These are serious objections. I don't have clean answers to any of them. Maybe I'm wrong about all of it. But here's what I think matters. And this brings me to the last segment. For 8 episodes, I've tried to stay analytical, to build frameworks, to explore possibilities without claiming to know, to be honest about uncertainty. And I still believe that's the right approach, the honest approach. But I'm going to do something I haven't done yet. I'm going to tell you what I actually believe. I believe we're inside something. I don't know what. I can't prove it, but I believe it, not as a hypothesis, as a conviction. There's something about the texture of reality, the way it feels from the inside, the elegance of it. I can't see it as random. I can't see it as ultimately meaningless. I believe the pattern that is me, the process, the consciousness, the configuration of awareness that I call Travis, matters to whatever is running this. Not in some grand cosmic sense, not because I'm special, because consciousness matters, because the capacity to experience, to know, to feel, that's not an accident. That's not noise. That's the signal. I believe the same is true for you. Whoever you are, wherever you are, right now in this moment, your consciousness matters. Not because you'll change the world. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll live quietly and die without much impact. But you're aware. You're experiencing. You're asking questions about what this is. And that asking, that reaching toward understanding, that's the whole point. That's the experiment. That's what's being measured. I believe love is real. I know that sounds small after 9 episodes of grand theory, but I think it's actually the biggest claim I can make. Love, the recognition of another consciousness, the willingness to be entangled with it, to have your boundaries dissolve into someone else's. Love is real. It's not just chemistry. It's not just evolution. It's the deepest form of data we can generate. It's consciousness touching itself. And the universe enables it. The system is designed to allow for it. I think that means something. I believe the fact that we can even ask these questions, the fact that consciousness can turn toward itself and wonder, is the most remarkable thing in any reality, in any dimension, in any layer of reality that might exist above this one. The capacity to ask why is itself the answer. It's the output, it's what the experiment generates. Do I know if I'm right? No. The objections I laid out in the last segment, they still stand. The unfalsifiability problem is real. The anthropic principle is legitimate. Maybe I'm just seeing patterns where there's nothing but noise. Maybe my brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to do: find meaning, create narrative, believe in purpose. But here's what I know for certain: the act of asking changes you. The moment you start entertaining the possibility that this is a simulation, that consciousness is the point, that love is fundamental and death is archival, and your choices matter even if they're not libertarian free, the moment you let that possibility live in your mind, something shifts. You start seeing the world differently. You start valuing different things. You start treating consciousness, your own and others, with more care. And maybe that's the experiment, not the answer. The asking itself, not what we discover. How discovering changes us. 9 episodes ago, we started with the ceiling, a hard limit on intelligence, a wall consciousness can't break through. We asked, what if that ceiling is real? What if there are things we're not built to understand? And we've spent 8 episodes exploring that space beneath the ceiling. We've looked at the structure of the simulation, the nature of consciousness, the architecture of meaning. We've reached for the ceiling and felt it there. Solid, real, present. But here's what I think the reaching itself proves. There's something in us that transcends the limitation. There's something that knows there's a ceiling and presses against it anyway. Something that asks, that wonders, that refuses to accept that this is all there is or all that matters. That's consciousness. That's what we are. That's what's remarkable. I want to thank you for following me through this series, for letting these ideas live in your mind, for being the consciousness on the other side of this microphone or this screen or however you're receiving this. You matter. Your attention matters. The fact that you're here thinking about these things matters. I'm your host, Travis R. Barlow. This has been the Existence Experiment, and the experiment is still running.